Thank you so much, Maggie. And thank you so much, audience, for joining me today. We're going to have a pretty thorough presentation about reducing your risk for colon cancer through modifiable risk factors. So I'm happy to join you guys today and sort of go through that with a fine-tooth comb. So colon cancer is the third most common cancer, excluding skin cancer, for both men and women in the United States using 2024 estimates. And so this is some incidence rates for cancer. So for adults 65 and older, we fortunately have been seeing a decrease in colon cancer by 1% each year based on 2011, 2019 data. That's excellent. And for adults 55 to 64, we've seen that the incidence rates have been stable since the mid-1990s. And then for adults younger than 55, we've actually seen an alarming increase in the rates of colon cancer. What we have observed is an increase by 1 to 2% per year since the mid-1990s. And based on a 2023 American Cancer Society report, just to kind of put this into context, the incidence rate was 11% in 1995. So 1 in 10 adults aged younger than 55 had experienced a diagnosis of colon cancer. And then it jumped to 20%, or 1 in 5 adults aged younger than 55 in 2019. So that's a pretty big jump in the younger population. And so there's actually been a lot of studies regarding why is that? Is it, what we're eating, how much we move? Is it the increase in obesity and being overweight? Is it a change in our gut microbiome over the course of time? There's a lot of speculations, and basically it could be a combination of various factors, both modifiable and not modifiable. So if you're confused about what to eat for good health and cancer prevention, you are not alone. There are a lot of claims on how to cure modern diseases, including cancer. There's a lot of information on the internet, at the bookstore, on the TV. It's easy to become overwhelmed and hear conflicting information about what you should do to lower your risk for cancer and any other chronic medical conditions. So today we're going to be focusing on those modifiable risk factors, what we can do at home to promote health and wellness, and particularly the health and wellness of your colon. So more than 55% of colon cancers in the US are linked to these modifiable risk factors. Modifiable risk factors are things in which we have power to change, control. What we're seeing is a connection with colon cancer and some of these things, such as excess body weight, physical activity, long-term smoking, high consumption of red or processed meat, low calcium intake, heavy alcohol consumption, very low intake of fruits and vegetables, and inadequate intake of dietary fiber. Colorectal cancer is the third most common cancer in the United States, but it's also one of the most preventable cancers. Healthy diet, physical activity, weight management all contribute to reducing your colon cancer risk. We have the power. So what are these things that we want to hone in on? So we know that excess body fat increases your risk of colorectal cancer. It increases the levels of insulin in your blood and other related hormones that encourage the growth of a cancer. Excess fat also increases a pro-inflammatory environment. So excess fat puts our bodies in a chronic low-grade state of inflammation that can contribute to the growth of a cancer as well. And so over time, we haven't really made much headway in the obesity and overweight epidemic in the US. So based on 2017, 2018 data released by the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, it's a survey that collects health data and statistics for all ages in the US. We have found that 30% of the US population falls into that overweight category, 42% falls into that obesity category, and of that 42% obesity category, 9.2% fall into that severe obesity category. What this equates to is that nearly 3/4 of the US population falls into an overweight or obese category, which can potentially be connected with the rising incidence rates of colon cancer. Now, based on the trends in obesity in the United States for adults age 20 and older, and this is data pulled from 1999 through the period of 2018, the obesity rates have increased from about 30% to 42%. And those falling in that severe obesity category has also increased. So from 4.7% in 1999 to about 9.2 in 2018. So we haven't seen our data improve over the years with regards to achieving a healthier body weight. So this is something that researchers are looking into, is, this increase in colon cancer in the younger population somehow correlated with this increased level of, or increased incidence of obesity here in the United States. Now we would take a look at the younger children too, the prevalence in children aged 2 through 19. And I'm sorry, this should say 2017 to 2018 data, 2017 to 2018 data. But what we see here is that about 16% of the pediatric child and adolescent population was overweight. And that equates to every 1 in 6 children being in that overweight category. We also see that 19% of the childhood population, 19% were falling in that obese category. And then another 6% were falling in that severe obesity category. So we are seeing, some of these issues happening at a younger age, and perhaps driving those overweight and obesity numbers up higher into adulthood. So common eating habits. So what is fueling the obesity epidemic here in the US? Very much multifactorial. It's never an easy answer, right? The on-the-go schedules, contributing, to eating on the go, access to less nutritionally mindful foods such as convenience foods, fast foods, supersized portions. You take a look at maybe a plate from the 1980s, compare it to a plate today, the plate itself is larger. Decreased physical activity. I do also like to add perhaps food insecurity, rising grocery costs, food illiteracy, what, is healthy versus not. Maybe a lot of us have a good understanding of that, but how can you fit those nutritious foods within a tight grocery budget? That can be a challenging skill to accommodate. And sometimes you have to get creative when eating on a budget. But all these types of, behaviors can in fact lead to, taking in excess calories that we might not need that can contribute to unintended weight gain. Physical activity decreases colorectal cancer risk. So what that means is, when we're more active, a couple things happen. Our body can regulate hormone levels better. So for example, insulin levels go down, insulin growth factor rates go down. That's actually a connection right there with reduced risk for colon cancer. We see a reduction in inflammation, and active, individuals tend to burn more calories, right? So they are less likely to be in that overweight or obese category. Getting enough physical activity is super important. The American Institute for Cancer Research recommends getting at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity each day on most days of the week. Okay. Sorry, on most days of the week, I said each day. So 150 minutes each week. So that equates to 30 minutes 5 days a week, for example. Moderate physical activity includes things like going for a walk, dancing, bicycling, swimming, gardening, the gym. I always say look for something that you enjoy, and don't be afraid to try anything new. Of course, if you have any physical barriers, something, maybe in it, something that you may be injured multiple times, a heart condition, always consult with your doctor before starting a new exercise program. So red meat actually increases risk for colon cancer. So red meat is high in something called heme iron. Heme iron is the type of iron that is only found in animal-based proteins. While iron is great, prevents anemia, helps with our energy levels, this particular type of iron has been linked to the kind of cellular damage that increases risk. Excess red meat can damage the lining of your intestines and can possibly increase your risk of colon cancer. Red meat stimulates the production of something called N-nitroso compounds, which basically are chemical substances that are carcinogenic in nature that can promote the growth of a cancer. So what is red meat? So red meat is derived from any four-legged animal. So we're thinking about things like beef, pork, lamb, deer. Um, it can get confusing simply because the National Pork Board has a marketing slogan, pork, the other white meat. And so a lot of times, they kind of pivoted their marketing to suggest that pork has the same nutritional properties as white meat, like chicken. But in fact, it's just as high in heme iron as beef. So the nutritional definition of red meat is any meat derived from a four-legged animal, because these particular animals, when cooked, are going to have a lot of heme iron. Another thing to keep in mind is it okay to eat red meat? Absolutely. But we really want to look at our portion sizes, because what we have found in research is that if one consumes greater than 18 ounces a week cooked, that can greatly increase the risk for colon cancer. So we really want to take a look at our portion sizes and just be mindful of that. How often are we eating red meat, and how much are we eating in a sitting? So a 3-ounce portion of meat is equivalent to the size of a deck of cards, or about the size of your palm, and kind of using that as a guideline when we're thinking, okay, she said no more than 18 ounces a week. So what does that physically look like? So this is a good example of what a 3-ounce portion looks like. Another example is meatballs. Each inch meatball made with, let's say, beef or a combination of red meats is equal to the size of a golf ball. Okay, so 3 golf ball sized meatballs is about 3 ounces of red meat. So when we're thinking about red meat and trying to stay within that, 18-ounce max per week, we might also be thinking, oh, yeah, I do eat pork. Yeah, okay, I'm thinking the bacon, I'm thinking the sausage, I'm thinking the burgers and the meatballs, maybe decreasing the frequency in what you eat red meat, thinking about the portion sizes, and also thinking about alternatives to red meat. Maybe instead of doing red meat 4 days a week, you try to get down to twice a week. But then again, you do need protein from other sources, right, to protect your muscles for one. So some alternatives to red meat that contain little to no or less heme iron or no heme iron, because the plant-based foods don't, include things like chicken, turkey, fish, seafood, eggs, whole soy foods like tofu and edamame, beans, lentils, chickpeas, nuts, seeds, quinoa, and reduced fat dairy. Cooking, how we cook and prepare our meats also does matter. So when we prepare high-fat meats and expose them to high temperatures, this can increase the risk of colon cancer. So what these high temperatures do is they produce heterocyclic amines and polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which is basically chemistry talk for these molecules that are produced upon the cooking process that can be potentially dangerous to the lining of our colon. So these include things like frying, grilling, broiling. These are high temperature cooking methods. And I don't want to be the one to say, hey, no grilling, it's the summer, spring is coming up. Absolutely, you can still grill, but think about those more lean sources of protein. Maybe instead of doing 80% lean beef patties, you do 93% lean beef patties. Or maybe instead of doing beef burgers on the grill, you do turkey burgers, which are inherently lower in fat. Or maybe instead of doing Burgers, you do grilled chicken. So there's certainly other options you can do there on the grill. It's just being mindful to limit, to really think about, those high temperature cooking methods and what would be the best proteins to prepare on those high temperature cooking methods. If you plan to use the high temperature cooking method, so we're thinking about those leaner meats, the round meats, the sirloins, the chucks and the loin cuts tend to be the leanest selections for steak. And then look for the ground beef labeled 85% lean or greater. Also think about things like pork chops and tenderloin cut. At least they're leaner. So if you're eating red meat and you're exposing your red meat to high temperatures, these are leaner cuts that you can utilize. Wild game, such as venison and bison. And then, of course, choosing alternatives to the red meat like the turkey burgers. Processed meats is another thing to talk about. These are meats that are preserved through the processes of smoking, salting, curing, adding in preservatives such as nitrates and nitrites. These include meats that naturally have that pink hue, like hot dogs, bacon, sausage, and your cured lunch meats. So why are meats processed? Well, in short, salting, curing, smoking, these all increase the shelf life of meats by preventing bacteria from forming. Also, who would lie and say that, hey, salt enhances flavor, it also increases moisture. Many of us kind of crave that as consumers to food. It lends to pinkish color, so you could see that, like, for example, with the spam picture here I have. But any amount of processed meat can increase your risk for colon cancer. So this is important to note because red meat, it's only high red meat consumption is connected with colon cancer risk. But with processed meat, the American Institute for Cancer Research and the American Cancer Society really say any amount is technically not safe. So what does processed meat do? Well, it leads to the formation of carcinogenic chemicals, okay? And these chemicals can destroy the lining of your gut over time. The added salt content promotes inflammation, which can also upregulate cancer growth over time. So let's look at what the World Health Organization says. So in 2016, the World Health Organization actually reassigned processed meats from a group 2, probably carcinogenic category, to a group 1, definitely carcinogenic category within their grading system. Now, those things in group 1 are known to be carcinogenic to humans, and that is the same group in which tobacco smoking and asbestos is in. So it's something that we know can cause cancer, not probably cause cancer. When we put red meat and we look at the WHO for that, that is categorized to group 2A, probably carcinogenic to humans. So what about getting uncured meat? Well, I like to say that it is potentially the lesser of two evils, but it's only one aspect of the processing process. So you might see in the market like uncured bacon, uncured hot dogs, made without preservatives, like hot buttons, right? You're like, ooh, that's got to be better. It's an extra $1, but I'll buy it. A lot of times what is utilized in these products is naturally occurring ingredients, such as celery powder to help with the preservation process, okay? But this only addresses one aspect of the processing of meats, simply because even though meat might not have preservatives in it, it might use celery powder instead, the meats might be smoked, and that long exposure to the smoking process can increase risk for colon cancer. So we're just really just looking at that one aspect, and that's not going to be everything when it comes to the processing of these meats. So I'd like to think, hey, it's the lesser of two evils, but we simply do not have the research to support yet that uncured meats are less carcinogenic than cured meats. Excess alcohol increases risk for colon cancer. So, of course, alcohol is processed down to a molecule called, or a substance called ethanol, which is recognized as a carcinogen and can lead to the damage of your DNA. Alcohol can also help potential carcinogens enter the cells. And what this means is, let's say you're taking in a carcinogen. Let's say you're smoking tobacco and you're drinking alcohol. Those two together combined, the alcohol increases the how much carcinogens penetrate those cells. So the two bad habits in one make it even worse, right? So the suggestion is if you don't drink alcohol, don't start. But if you do drink alcohol, just watch your portion sizes, limit your consumption to no more than 2 drinks a day for men, 1 drink a day for women. And everybody has a different context. So if you're somebody who, let's say, drinks twice a week, maybe look to, decrease your alcohol intake to once a week, or look at how much you're drinking in one set period in time. This is an example because everybody also has a different idea about what a serving of alcohol is. But by definition, a serving of alcohol is a 12-ounce fluid ounce can of beer, 8 to 9 ounces of malt liquor, 5 ounces of table wine, or 1.5 ounces of spirits like hard liquor. So we talked a lot about things that we know can potentially increase your risk for colon cancer. However, there are a lot of foods that have been studied to decrease the risk of colon cancer. So we're going to shift gears now and talk a little bit about those helpful foods to include in your diet. So phytonutrients is something that we find in plant-based foods. They lend plants their color, their odor, and their flavor, and they can enhance the chemical processes inside our bodies in helpful ways, such as strengthening your immune system, blocking carcinogens, reducing inflammation, preventing DNA damage, reducing any damage to your cell. So this is really what we are going to emphasize in these next few slides. So phytonutrients decrease the risk of colon cancer risk. This includes phytonutrients are very rich in plant-based foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, whole soy foods like tofu and edamame. So all pictured here. And foods that are rich in fiber also decrease risk for colon cancer. So just so happens to be a lot of those plant-based foods, right? So fiber helps improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammation, and it gives potentially toxic waste less time to come in contact with your intestinal cells. So let's say if you're more regular with your bowel movements, adding in extra fiber will help your body digest your food and will help you evacuate any toxic waste, so that toxic waste isn't sitting in your intestinal cells, exerting a negative result. You might have heard of the MyPlate. In a lot of literature from the American Institute for Cancer Research and the American Cancer Society, we talk about something called the New American Plate, where 2/3 of your plate is filled with plant-based foods and the other 1/3 with a protein of your choice. So cover at least 2/3 of your plate with whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans, and the remaining 1/3 of your plate with a protein. If it is an animal-based protein, that could be an option like seafood, poultry, dairy, and occasionally lean red meat. And this is sort of, another example of what the plate looks like. You see, we have grilled chicken on here. We have some so quinoa and a variety of different vegetables like broccoli, tomatoes, peppers. When we eat a variety of different vegetables, we're not only taking in a variety of different vitamins and minerals, but we're also taking in a variety of cancer protective phytonutrients. So for example, broccoli is high in sulforaphane, which is a known phytonutrient that reduces the risk of cancer. Look at our grains. So our grains can be a great way to get an extra fiber. Some common whole grains in the diet include barley, buckwheat, oats, quinoa, brown rice, whole grain rye, spelt, whole wheat, or whole grain. When we go through the processing of a grain to make it into lower in fiber, what happens is the bran layer and the endosperm are removed. And the bran contains all the fiber and the phytonutrients and the vitamin E, and the endosperm contains the B vitamins. What we're left when we have a processed grain is germ. Now, you might see that term enriched wheat flour. That is not whole grain. What that means is the outer two layers were removed, the germ was left, and then they added in B vitamins that were stripped away from that processing. So what's not added back into refined wheat flour is the vitamin E, which is an antioxidant, the fiber, or any of those cancer protective phytonutrients. So when we're looking at our breads or our pastas, look for that word whole. That whole, WHOLE, is the operative word, not necessarily the word wheat. Whole grains include things like oatmeal, whole wheat bread, brown rice, bran flakes. And we see all these types of foods are going to provide us with some fiber as well as an array of phytonutrients that is going to reduce your risk of colon cancer. So I'm going to get into some pictures too of practical applications of how to include some plant-based foods and high fiber foods into your diet. So I hope everyone had dinner, and if not, I hope you're eating now so you're not hungry. Um, we have chickpea salad, we have black bean soup, we have chili, thinking about things like lentil salad and lentil soup. Also quinoa-based dishes, hot or cold, barley soup or barley salad. And also, what about salad? Well, salad can be a main entree, especially if you're adding in, proteins like grilled chicken or chopped nuts or reduced fat dairy. Also thinking about creative ways of how to prepare your vegetables. If you're cooking your vegetables in one particular way, and things kind of get boring or on routine, and you're like, oh, I only eat these three things, this three ways, and that's it. Start thinking about maybe ways to explore with your vegetables, maybe roasting with some olive oil, salt, pepper, garlic powder, or your tomatoes, your carrots, sauteing your vegetables in a pan. Thinking about your cruciferous vegetables, which offer an array of phytonutrients, cauliflower, broccoli, um, collard greens, we see Brussels sprouts, raw vegetables. So how can we consume raw vegetables, not only as a salad, but as our snacks midday, maybe, a handful of cherry tomatoes or some carrots paired with hummus, or peanut butter. And we see here some hummus pairings with our fresh vegetables, ways to get in that extra fiber, not only during meal times, but also during snack times. Thinking about your fresh fruits, maybe eating with the season to be more budget friendly, but making a fresh fruit salad, um, apples, grapes, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, all great for you. Nuts and nut butters. So pairings can be important too. I know that if I'm hungry and I have an apple, I'm probably still going to be hungry. But if you pair your sources of carbohydrates or your low calorie sources like apples, bananas, celery are all low calorie in nature, but if you pair these low calorie foods with protein like peanut butter, or a cashew butter or an almond butter, or with nuts, or hey, if you have a nut allergy, maybe a reduced fat cheese. These would be better options to have in more complete nutrition with regards to protein that can kind of keep you fuller longer with regards to, weight management. Another example of a protein pairing is fruit with yogurt, fruit with reduced fat cheese. And also thinking about your healthy fats. So healthy fats are not only high in vitamin E, which is a powerful antioxidant, but healthy fats are also high in omega-3s and omega-9 fatty acids, which are the kind of fatty acids that reduce inflammation and improve your overall cholesterol panel. So we're looking at things like nuts, seeds, tree nuts, as well as peanuts, any type of seed like flaxseed, chia seeds, sunflower seeds, olive oil, canola oil, avocados, and of course your fatty fishes like salmon. All can be powerful vehicles for these healthy dietary fats. And alternatives to salt. Okay, salt can certainly be used in the kitchen. Let's say if you're roasting vegetables, like I said before, but just moderation. Think about other things you can add to your recipe, so to speak. So for example, garlic powder, onion powder, um, your fresh herbs, maybe cilantro, basil, tarragon, rosemary, really thinking about those types of things. Rosemary, sorry, thinking about those types of things that can bring out flavors in your dishes without necessarily adding in excess salt.
I have a picture of turmeric here because turmeric has been studied a lot with reduction in risk in colon cancer. And turmeric is a spice that you can get in the spice aisle ground up. And you could add it to things like chili, your eggs. What they're finding with turmeric is it has a low bioavailability. What that means is the colon doesn't absorb turmeric as well. So when we eat turmeric, it sits in our colon and exerts a prolonged anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer effect. So turmeric is really good with that regard as well. Thinking about drawing out flavors, utilizing garlic, onions in your dishes, and also looking at beverages. So beverages can be a sneaky vehicle for extra calories, right? Our sugar sweetened beverages like regular soda, sugar sweetened iced tea. Um, so really thinking about, okay, where am I getting in those extra calories? If it's from beverages, thinking about getting a putting fruit in your water, like for example, fresh lemon, fresh limes. I never personally had a fruit diffuser like these pictures here, but I'm known to like throw in pieces of lemons, limes, oranges in my water to kind of perk up the taste, especially when water gets boring. Um, Milk also has a place here. The American Institute for Cancer Research suggests reduced fat milk simply because whole milk lends extra calories, extra fat, which can lead to unintended weight gains. So milk does have a purpose. Milk does have calcium and vitamin D, which is super important for our bone health. So reduced fat milk can be a vehicle for hydration. And then orange juice. If you're going to drink orange juice, 100% orange fruit juice, orange juice is an excellent source of potassium. Um, so if you're going to have anything that's going to lend calories, like the reduced fat milk, the orange juice, have some redeeming nutritional value to it. Potassium, vitamin C in the OJ, and calcium and vitamin D in the milk. So all these types of things, if you're going to drink your fluids, thinking about hydration, thinking about limiting or avoiding your sugar sweetened beverages. And if you're going to drink beverages with calories, making sure that you're getting some redeeming nutritional value out of it. Unfortunately, I wish there was a magic pill, but in research, we haven't found that one particular supplement can reduce your risk of cancer. It can be definitely a hard thing to sort of isolate and identify, but what we have found is a connection between diet and colon cancer risk. So the best way to get your vitamins, your minerals, your fiber, your antioxidants, and your phytochemicals is from food itself. I would like to note, kind of going back to one of those initial slides, that the incidence of colon cancer is on the rise in the younger populations. And this is just one slide that sort of captures one of the facets that we're looking at in driving this trend. The colon holds hundreds, thousands, millions of strains of bacteria, and what a lot of research is looking at is at the gut microbiome and the shift in the gut microbiome over the course of generations. Um, what bacteria do we have in our guts compared to younger generations, compared to older generations? And is there any connection there? So prebiotics are basically fibers that help feed the healthy bacteria in your gut, right? So the bacteria in your gut needs fiber to survive, okay? And the fiber needs bacteria to digest it. It's like a symbiotic relationship, okay? Um, but prebiotics is found in things like bananas, onions, garlics, leeks, soybeans, whole grains, lots of fiber foods. And what one of the speculations is that as we go on to more of a processed fast food type of diet, we're not getting in enough fiber. And so we're not getting in enough prebiotic fiber to help feed the healthy bacteria in our gut. So probiotics is the live bacteria in our gut. It helps digest our foods. It helps enhance immunity. So we really want to make sure that we're promoting getting enough fiber to feed the probiotics, the bacteria in our gut. There is some foods that naturally contain bacteria strains, such as yogurt, fermented dairy products like kefir and aged cheeses, and also soup. and sauerkraut, kimchi. These types of things all have bacteria in it that is helpful for our colonic health. But nonetheless, we need to make sure we're getting enough fiber to help feed that healthy bacteria. So our goal is to make your colon happy. Some finishing comments here. It's never too late to try something new. Always great to be proactive, not reactive. Everybody's here coming from different age categories with different backgrounds, circumstances, cultures, religions, and different responsibilities. But recognizing whatever those barriers are to change and strategizing and planning, how can you really support a healthier version of you? Practice mindful eating, slowing it down. It takes about 20 minutes for our brain to signal to our stomach that we're full. So slowing it down when we're eating can be a great modality to avoid under eating. Small changes do go a long way. You might not see it right away. Sometimes we're maybe hyper focused on our clothing size or what the scale says. But even just losing 5 to 10 pounds can have a dramatic effect on what's going on inside your body. Support healthy eating habits from very young generations. So it's never too late, never too early, I would say. Once a child gets the go ahead to introduce, foods 4 to 6 months of age. It's never too early to introduce healthy fruits, vegetables, whole grains, because it's much easier to sustain a healthy eating habits into adulthood when they're introduced at a younger age. So those are just my finishing comments to the team. I will leave the chat open here so I can take a look at it. I apologize, Dr. Berry couldn't come on, so I took a little bit longer took my time with this presentation. But yes, if anybody has any comments, please post them in the chat and I'll take a look at that. Okay, so I have a chat coming in. I heard that plastics are so bad for you. And what is the story about tea bags? Are there plastics involved? There is definitely a shift from plastic more to like glassware. And I have to say, I haven't looked at the literature recently. I'm sort of part of that general community. But what I would say is that I personally been switching more to glassware. I know that a lot of plastics will use BPA, which has been studied for potentially increasing risk for cancer overall, actually. So that is something that a lot of folks are doing now, and I would support that based on the information that we have here today. What is the story with tea bags? Are there plastics involved? I haven't seen any literature on this. Again, I apologize. Because thankfully, like tea is a great beverage to have, right? Especially if you're not adding in a ton of sugar. But there's always new research evolving, and what I would suggest is some reliable resources. So the first one I would go to is the American Institute for Cancer Research website, and that is AICR.org. There's a lot of valuable information in there. And then I would also, there's a search engine where you can type in your questions about these specific hot topics. Another great resource is the Environmental Working Group. The Environmental Working Group has information about things outside of nutrition, such as best cleaning products, best cosmetics. I might also broach that topic about the tea bags, to be fair. I love the Environmental Working Group because you can actually, me as a consumer, I might be thinking I'm using the best sunscreen, but we see a lot of stuff in the news about certain ingredients being used in sunscreens that can increase risk for cancer. So I use the Environmental Working Group as a way to sort of guide me as a consumer in those non-nutritional pathways. And they also have a free app. I just pulled it up right now. It's called Healthy Living. And it's a free app that you can use. And there's even like a barcode. You could scan your products in the store, your cosmetics, your cleaning products, and it'll tell you, it actually rates it, you know, good or bad on a scale of 1 to 10, and will tell you why it rated good or why it rated bad. And, it's kind of eye-opening because, there are regulations about what we use in our products, but there's still a lot that we don't know. And we might not know about the specific products we're using. So I would recommend those two resources for that question. Is there any connection with prostate cancer and colon cancer? I will say that a lot of research about prevention of prostate cancer sort of overlaps with colon cancer. Like we do see the connection with the red meat with prostate cancer and the processed meat with prostate cancer. Very unusually do I see two primary cancers at the same time, like with the prostate and the colon. But one thing you can do is if you have a strong family history, is to consider getting a genetics panel done. Here at Capitol Health, we have a genetics department where if you have a strong family history, you can speak with a genetic counselor. And basically, the way the genetic counseling is done is you would submit a saliva sample. And just from that one saliva sample, they're able to tell you if you're positive for any of those genes for cancer. So that is something that's very valuable. I personally had it done because my mom had ovarian cancer, and typically doing the whole panel with or without insurance was $250. So I thought like a very affordable endeavor, especially if you have a family history of cancer. Another question in the panel: digesting seeds is difficult. Is this a red flag? I have this conversation with my patients a lot, especially those who have a history of diverticulosis or diverticulitis, which are little pouches in the colon where perhaps food can get lodged and cause inflammation and get you really sick. What I would say about things like flaxseed, chia seeds, I would suggest getting the ground variety, especially if you have any issues digesting, like an issue with diverticulitis or diverticulosis. The ground would be a better option for those particular products. Or like, let's say nuts and seeds. I'm sorry, nuts. Like instead of doing peanuts or almonds, maybe do the almond butter or the peanut butter. I will say this, based on current evidence and discussions with multiple gastroenterologists, research hasn't proven that eating whole seeds or nuts increases the risk of you having a diverticulitis flare. But nonetheless, many patients with a history of diverticulitis will avoid it altogether because they do see the connection themselves. But my point is there's ways around it, like getting the ground chia seed or the ground flax seed or getting the nut butters instead. Is broccoli a good cancer inhibitor? So broccoli is because of two reasons, maybe even multifactorial. We got to think that you can get more complete nutrition from a vegetable than perhaps from like a single supplement on the market. Because what does broccoli have in it? Broccoli has fiber, okay, very rich in fiber. It also is rich in vitamin C, which many of us might not be aware of because we think of oranges as vitamin C, but vitamin C, which is a powerful antioxidant. It also contains those phytonutrients, and in broccoli particularly, it's sulforaphane, which is an antioxidant that has been studied for its cancer protective qualities. What about ice cream? Ice cream is moderation is key with some of these like Hallmark sweets, right? So if you're going to have ice cream, maybe get those little custard cups. If you eat directly out of the pint, right, you're more likely to eat more. So just being mindful of that, perhaps scooping out a small portion into a custard cup. Typically, ice cream's made with full-fat dairy and extra sugar. So it typically can be a pathway to get in extra calories that you don't need. But portion control, I would recommend with that. And if you are really an ice cream lover and you're like, oh, I eat it every day, there are ways to go about it. Maybe doing a smoothie instead with fresh fruits, reduced fat dairy, maybe some peanut butter, making a sorbet. When my daughter was younger and she was doing purees, I got like the immersion blender out and I did banana, peanut butter, and soy milk and just blended it. And then I would find myself tasting it like, oh, and it's nice. Oh, this is like a sorbet. I can eat this myself. So sometimes it just takes some creativity to break some of those those habits. How bad is ham? Lunch meat or ham for cooking soups and such. So ham is considered a red meat, so just put it in that moderation category, no more than 18 ounces a week. Um, whole ham, fine, but if you're dealing with like lunch meat ham, one of the vocabularies or that you can use at the deli counter is, do you have uncured preservative-free ham? A lot of deli counters will have this offered to you. Keep in mind it will likely be slightly more expensive and slightly different than the lunch meat you're used to getting. But there is such thing as uncured or preservative-free lunch meat, and sort of asking, your deli counter, do you have this? Or like if it's a prepackaged thing, will it say it on there? Again, that will be the lesser of two evils when we come to compare cured and uncured. If it's smoked turkey, let's say, uncured, preservative-free smoked turkey. All right, it doesn't have those preservatives in it, but it's still smoked, and that is a cooking process that can potentially increase risk for colon cancer. So, like I said, if you're going to have lunch meat, maybe look for the uncured because it's the lesser of two evils. What about canned versions of the fruits and vegetables, beans, and for instance, to remove salt? Oh, those are great. Yes. So rinsing your canned goods, like your canned beans, in a strainer under cold running water for about 15 to 30 seconds reduces I was reading a statistic like 50 something percent of the sodium content. So it doesn't wash away all the salt, but it does definitely take away a good amount of the salt. So I do recommend that if you're somebody who does canned vegetables or canned beans. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining this evening. Have a great night.
You too.